I'm going to go ahead and get it started. If you guys are working on something else, it's fine. It's being recorded, so you can always go in the back, in the front end, and catch what you needed to. So if you're working on something else, it's okay. And any of the rest of you who join, again, you can just always start at the beginning of the thing and pick up what we did. This may give you guys some extra time to get to class, whatever we need to do. We are we are at week 4, and I want to go to the student view so I don't confuse everybody with some stuff I've got in there, as usual. And there we go. And what we have this week, you have the Rockoff exam, chapter 4. Got that due, when is it due? It's one attempt, 75 minutes, 6 p.m. And I think the other is due at 6 p.m. If I'm expect, chapter 4 and 5 both are due at 6 p.m. and they are one attempt. Now, we've been working ahead doing the lunches databases, and we really have worked ourselves up to lunches database number 5. And again, since I'm recording it, you always go back and catch this, but chapter number 5 in the text talks about the data dictionary and so-called other Oracle topics. And this chapter is based on the fact that at the end of the textbook, if you wish, you can download a baby Oracle and put it on your machine. Now, that's over on Appendix B, page 765. So if you have your own machine and you want to try it, you can. You will have seen enough code by then with the Oracle and SQL, or just the Oracle, that you'll know, you'll have a good idea of what you're looking at. And in fact, it's one of the alternative, I have it as an alternative assignment for people, those who might want to do that. But don't do it unless you got your own machine, and I would never have you load something on somebody else's. Now, this chapter is somewhat useful for you, although you're working in Access, because it does give you a peek behind the curtains as far as how Oracle sets up a data dictionary. Now, let's talk about what a data dictionary is, first of all. And we're going to do that by going over to the files. And I have a file over there for Lunches Database 5. And that's what I want everybody to upload for 5. Here it is. And I just now published it. So you'll want to download it. When we talk about a data dictionary, this is the practical aspect of what I talked about before in terms of this whole concept of a data warehouse, this whole concept of having dimension tables that speak to a couple of things. One, constants that we might be dealing with. They may be numeric, they may be alphanumeric, and attributes that are linked to a customer, usually to a customer, to a product, or some phase or piece of a transaction. And then we have fact tables, and those are just simply lists of stuff that's occurred. And if as far as an analogy, a general journal would be as close as I can get to what a fact table is. And then we harvest that fact table. Then we've encountered what we call a data warehouse table, and that's one that's going to be a blend of dimension and fact. It's usually one that's harvested to produce it harvests data from several tables. And the authors, when we were working with this Access textbook, the Rockoff, he was showing us, some of the nomenclature like DIM for dimension table, fact, FACT before the name of the table, a DW head, a DW sales table, and that one was was more really what you and I are used to working with, because we're pulling data from several tables, and it's intended to help us get the best, to make the most of what we have when we work with correlated data. You said, what are you talking about? Okay, let me explain this. When we create a table, okay, in a machine, unless we're out on the cloud, and really on the cloud we do anyway, we create physical addresses. That's why server space is so important, because you are physically placing an object there. It's a 1 or a 0, and some combination of 1s and 0s make up a letter, a number, a word, whatever. Okay. Now, in the past, when we did databases, we had to utilize what we called pointers, and we'd have to write database. We would actually literally have to call the architect, call the address to get the data. But with object-oriented programming, we don't have to do that, thank goodness. Now, when we link tables at its purest, most physical aspect, we are saying, I want a primary key, or some record, some piece of a record, or maybe 2 pieces of a record if you have 2 primary keys that are an exact match. And that's where you get what we call, that intersection. And we call it correlated data because the data are indeed correlated, okay? They match exactly, like we match DNA, like we run a correlation coefficient. It's the same story. And if they don't match, it doesn't work. So the data dictionary is really important, because it's the place where we indicate, okay, what is this object, and why do we collect it? And let me show you. Now in Oracle, the author shows you how to write the queries and the definition and the statements and so forth to create that. The truth is, in the commercial products that are out there now, the most database administrators wouldn't put up with that for a minute. They have an object-oriented environment in which they work. In fact, when you and I are looking at this, and then we dive down into tables, or the design view, or the code view, you're getting to see the back office piece of a database or a data warehouse that you normally don't see when you interact with Google, Amazon, or what you will interact with in terms of a dashboard at work. But just to show you, we'll open up, here's a table of contents, and I'm going to go down, constants, excuse me. You said, what do you mean? Well, in this situation, okay, we have some constants, constant types of data, variables that we plug in. Business name, business start date, lunch budget, owner name. Those, and this is what we would call a slowly changing dimension, because we may add to it, but it's rare that we would update the business start date. It's rare we would change the owner's name. It's rare we'd change the business name. But those are constants that we use. Now, to see that, okay, you can see citywide uniforms, the business start date, their budget, and the owner's name. Now you say, why is this important? This is important because a database should be a physical model, because it has physicality. A database has stuff stored in tables. A database has code somewhere stored in terms of queries that have been run. It's an expression of those variables that you think are important, 1. 2, those transactions that you think are important, and 3, the periodic types of information you need to pull from all that, and number 4, the kinds of what-if analysis or serendipitous analysis you need to make. Now, right now, you know more about databases than 95% of the people you'll ever work for or with, or who will work for you. But that's important, because this whole thing is to get you thinking about how your business is organized, especially the flow of the information. Just like you want to understand the flow of money, okay, you need to understand the flow of data. And this is not much different. If this was a logistics class, what I'd say is the logistics of any organization is a physical expression of what it does. Okay. This university is a credit generating factory. How do I know? You walk in, it's like a factory. We all have a workstation. We all do our work. You have a supervisor. You generate credit hours, and we send you a bill. If it's a restaurant, it's got a place for people to eat, a place for people to get condiments, etc., ad infinitum. It has a physicality to it. So understanding that, then you begin to ask yourself, okay, what is in here that I need or I don't need, okay? And how is it then that I take these combinations and work them? And this is why I talked about that notion, of the analytical cube, okay? And you have to think of this like pixels. The more pixels you get compressed, the clearer an image becomes. And the more you can go through that cube and pull data, the better you can understand the transactions that occur, and the better you can understand your customers, really your stakeholders. And hopefully, the better you can understand what's going on in the outside environment. So here's, these are constants. Now, here's another, departments. Now, when you go through a reorganization, you're going to have to change those names if you do, or if you add some departments, you'll have to add them. This is, again, what we call a slowly changing dimension. Now, the data dictionary. Okay, we all want to make sure that we're talking the same language, okay? And if you look at this, and this is an Access Data Dictionary. Again, the author shows you the code to write and all that business, but back in the real world, if you were a DBA or working with a vendor, they'd be working at a graphic user interface just like this. But I want you to notice what's here. The field name, that is the variable, the dimension, then the type of data. This has a lot to do with two things: storage, okay, and presentation. If I don't have these data stored correctly, I can't present them, and I really can't. And even the precursor to the presentation is the manipulation of them. Now, in the real world, okay, if I was the DBA and I walked in and I pulled this and I saw this, whoever was running it wouldn't be working there. They'd be gone like that. I need to know the who, what, where, and when of this dimension. In fact, I need a record of any kind of updates that occurred, when that was changed and why, or the responsible parties, so that we all understand what we mean. Let me give you a very simple, but I think useful example. And that's why I'm spending this time. I love working with churches and their databases. As I've told you probably before and you've detected, I'm not a very religious person. And I don't like organized religion. That's why I'm a Baptist, okay? And I see proof of that when I go in and work with a church and they'll have visitors. What's a visitor? Is that a person who came on Sunday but didn't go to Sunday school? Is that a person who came and went to Sunday school but didn't go to church? Is that a person who brought their kid on Wednesday night and had to sign in when they dumped them off at Awanas or whatever? And trust me, I have been the presider or umpire over some of those fights, and they can become really crucial. And what I've had to say to them is you have several categories of visitor, and you won't understand who they are or what they're all about until you get that data, until you differentiate it. Now, to complicate all of that is the issue that these are data inputted by volunteers. You can't walk up to Mrs. Smith, who's been at the church 57 years, and can barely type stuff into the thing, into a kiosk, and she's scared to death she'll blow up the whole universe, and go to her and say, hey, pick up the pace, lady. You can't do that. So these are always interesting kinds of cases to work with. It'll boggle your mind. I've told the story before. I had one church that for new visitors, they filled out a form that had 47 items. On average, only about 12 of those items were ever completed. I said, why ask them this if you're not going to collect it? And they said, well, we'd like to know. And as I ran report after report after report, they didn't know because somebody didn't fill them in. Because what they didn't do in that table was at the bottom, as they were filling out that form, okay, which feeds the table, and we all know that now, they didn't have a requirement. No duplicates, first of all, and number two, if you don't put something in there, I will not save the record, which is what we go back to, the problem of nulls and zeros. And this is so important because, trust me, I am a prophet. Not only am I a saint, because I took my wife to see Dances with the Stars in person, I am a saint. Okay? I'm also a prophet. One of these days you're going to go out to work and you're going to get a report, and it's going to be filled with all kinds of, where's all the data? And then you will confront that nasty little critter called the null versus the zero data. Is it null because I forgot? Is it null because the person who inputs the data for us, came in on Monday, they'd had one too many Red Bulls and one too many domestic disturbances, and so they just didn't fill out all the data? Or did I just simply not define that well enough? Okay? So those are the kinds of problems you run into. So this chapter on the data dictionary is really where the rubber meets the road, because if you don't know what you're collecting, there's no way for you to possibly handle it properly. And that also includes the data type because of the implications of storage, okay, manipulation, and presentation. Okay? And for example, in Excel, if you put in a date, you can change that date to a number because that's really what it is. But you might put in a date in the little toolbar in the formula area, but then you might get output, if you choose to make it look like a number, so you can kind of mask it. So this is an important chapter, and I provided this to you because there's also a whole lot of craziness in terms of him, walking you through about modifying a view, etc. Now, over on page 182 in your text, and if you don't have it with you, you'll always, if you revisit this video, okay, what you'll want to do is you'll want to make sure, okay, that you are seeing what's happening in terms of this process. A beginning table, and again, if it's garbage in, garbage out. If the table's garbage, you'll get garbage at the end. The beginning table, then a beginning view. Now remember, a view is just a fancy way of saying I ran a query and I saved the code. When we run queries today, we save the code. That's why we don't alter the tables physically. It used to be that when we ran a database, we would physically alter the table, and we ran out of room real fast. So thankfully, we have object-oriented programming, and then we can see this cycle and see we follow beginning table, beginning view. Okay, then we change the data, then we get an ending view and an ending table. Now, if we're actually working at the data dictionary level, or we're working at truly altering a table, we end up with a brand new one. But we better be sure. But most of the time, what you and I do is we do step 1 and step 2, and we save the code. We don't mess with the data. Okay, and I can't emphasize that enough, because the most practical thing for you is to make sure if you're going to spend, if your company or you is going to spend the money to collect all this data, to try to work with it, to hire an outside firm to come in and be a vendor, or hire your own IT people, and deal with all that. Get the most out of your money and make sure you get what you need to get. Okay, and that you understand why you're doing. That's why we give you this course, so that when you leave, not only can you run a spreadsheet, and let me put it like this. Let's take you versus the young people at OU. They take one course. They leave, they can do a spreadsheet. But they don't understand that why we do a spreadsheet. They just know they can run a spreadsheet. Why do we run a spreadsheet? I run a spreadsheet because it will let me do one very important thing. It will let me build a model of my business. It will let me see. And when we get into management science, we use that optimization. We use the optimizer to say, well, okay, if I change these variables and work with these constraints, and I have this target, or I minimize or max, here's what I got. Okay, that's kind of like having a roadmap. Otherwise, you're driving the car, looking. Not one of you would get in your car and look in the rearview mirror to drive it. But that's what most companies do, hoping for the best. And your ability to do predictive data, to build predictive models, that type of thing. So they might understand that, but they don't at all understand databases. And that's where you have a tremendous competitive advantage when you come out of here. Because almost everything is a database or a model of a database built upon that. Now, to give you a good example of that out in the real world, YouTube, which started out with just some people recording pictures of their cats doing crazy things, is now negotiating deals to stream content. YouTube is becoming a channel from which you can watch movies, sporting events, and all that. They're evolving to that, and everybody's shaking in their boots. Go out sometime just for kicks and go see how many YouTube videos are posted a day. You would be astounded. You go, whoa. Okay, now let's look at some of these queries that we've got down here, and I've got some chapter 4s in here, okay, as well as 5, and let's look at 4.10 method 2. Now this is back from chapter 4, but I want to look at the design view of it for just a second, okay? And this is we're using it. We're inserting into a table a set of data. Now let me say this: most commercial products work at a GUI. In other words, they'll have a create table function where you can use objects, so you don't have to write all this code. If you're lucky, you won't even have to mess with this. What you hopefully will be able to do is to talk about this stuff up here and why I have it and what it's supposed to tell me. But the authors want to show you, okay, how to use the insert, okay, to create that table. And then they give you a second method. This is again for 4.9. And I'm just showing the design so we don't mess around with recreating tables. Then here's a method 1. This is a lot of work. That's why the GUI is so much more effective, because you can go in and use the objects, and you just fill. When you do create table, let's just click on create table design. You tell me which is going to be easier for you, to work through this or to write the code. I think you and I both know what will be easier for you and more is to work through here. And it still generates the code. You just don't see it. But the authors want to let you see that whole business. Now, on chapter 5, okay, they give us chapter 5, this example 1, step 1. Let's look at the design view for just a moment. And here again is another of those insert statements, okay, where we're inserting into, what we're doing is we're inserting into this table 0505, the shipping department view. We're inputting some values. You say, why would I do that if I could create a form to do that? Aha, yeah. Create the form. And you input the data, or your employees input the data, or even better, let your customers input the data. Have you ever considered the fact that every time you buy something, you check yourself out. You go to Amazon, you check yourself out. You run around the store at Amazon, you get all the junk, you walk up front, and they don't even give you a kiss and say, please come back and see us. You input all the data. And if you don't put it in there just like they want, they stop your transaction. They're mean people at Amazon. But they let you get your stuff. So we use a form. Let's scroll down here and see if we have any forms. Are there any? Now I see Zippo, 0, none. Okay? So again, if I wanted to insert that data into that table 1, I'd create the table, put in the fields, then I'd create a form and just put the data in as I need to, instead of writing all that code, because the objects save me that time. That really is chapter 5. Now, there's a whole bunch of different queries that I've got in here that you can work through. Well, let's look at this other one. This is example 1, step 4. And he has you create some stuff and then delete it, and create and delete it. And be my guest. But I think if you look at page 190 and 191 for a moment, what you're going to see is a whole lot of work, okay, that you could do much quicker and much easier someone else could do using a form. Now, the page 198, they walk you through the Access GUI method, the graphic user interface, and you're familiar with that. You've done it. We've created tables using that approach. We just click create table, and away we go. So, and so that's what he's talking about. Microsoft Access is a good model because it looks a lot like, from the back office as well as the front office part, what you'll see out in the real world in terms of tools or applications you'll work with. And when you get a chance to play around with SAS Visual Analytics, you'll see there's some really nice stuff out there. Again, the whole idea is that you understand the difference of the two and kind of how they all connect. So this chapter in some is helpful, but you can really miss it if you don't get it. And if you take a look at page 203, okay, you can see that you've got the field name, the data type, the description, and then down here in the bottom, the field properties. And that's where that's really critical. Let's click on foods for a moment, and let's go into the design view, okay? And you look down, and the first thing you see in the field properties is the field size. Now, the field properties menu, okay, is the same menu that all of these databases, everybody got together and said, what do we need to have in terms of field properties? And everybody agreed on that. So that we could take a database in one, or we could take an Oracle and convert it to an Access, or we could take them and turn them into SAS. We get stuff to talk to each other. And what is it we need? And you'll notice field size is the very first. Why? Because of the cost of saving transactions. Just like inventory, data comes at a cost. Data has a holding cost and an entry cost, just like inventory has a what? Holding cost and a cost of creating an order. Same kind of deal. Now, if you come down here, you'll see the format, an input mask. If you want to have the data inputted a particular way, this little critter called the caption, this is a way for you, if you desire, to mask the name of your tables, so that when the end user gets a result set or works at the GUI level creating queries, they don't see the real table names. Why? Because if you know the table names, you may be able to get in and hack the system. So that's a key piece. And if there's a default value, they have that, validation rules. This is probably the one that's the most consequential, and that is this required? if it's required, then the record won't save. And I've never recommended anybody to have a table that doesn't require every single field. If you don't need it, don't require it, don't put it in the table. And what you'll find, you're going to see this when you go to work, is what people have what I call the kitchen sink table, where they put every single thing in there because they don't understand a concept called normalization. Your textbook talks about that, Rockoff talks about it, and you may hear people out there talk about normalizing the data. Here's this very simple, here's what they really mean. Let's do some simple English. In English, a paragraph is designed to do what? It has a thesis sentence at the front if it's deductive. It has a concluding thesis sentence if it's inductive. And it expresses one thought. It has a thesis and supporting stuff. Normalized data have tables that relate only to one thing, and that's it. So the fields relate to, let's say, customer contact data. That's all you got. You don't have how much they bought from you or any of that stuff. That's over in another table. But you link the tables by using the fields. That's really all there is to it. Putting it in practice, that's the part that's the most. That's the part that's maybe a little bit more of a challenge. Now, Chapter 5 at the end of Chapter 5, they walk you through some key points. So that's really there for you, what you need as a working manager to get. Now, let me say this. I would never, ever, ever stop you if you said, boy, I would really like to learn more about this, to go and explore some more about data dictionaries and what they mean, okay? I can guarantee you, though, that any of our friends in accounting understand what they mean by that, because in accounting, if you meet generally accepted accounting standards, you do have ways of identifying transactions and how they flow through a system. Okay, so that's Chapter 5. So you'll want to use that and upload that for Chapter 5. It's LDB 5, okay? And that's really about all there is. But it's more about some thought process than you just running insert this and this and this, and that's why you have a form and why you want to use it. But the author, being old school, wants to make you change the tire in the middle of the rain rather than call OnStar. And there's some of you who go, I'll change that tire in the middle of the rain. Be my guest. And then after the first time you do it in the middle of the rainstorm out on one of the interstates, you will go, I'm calling OnStar. Or maybe you're one of those perverse individuals, which I see out on the highway, who have a flat, and you can tell they've been driving on that little donut tire for about 2 weeks, and they're going about 70 miles an hour, and it's really not designed for that, but hey, you know, let's live dangerous. Good enough for you. Good enough for you, good enough for me. Okay. Chapter 6, creating your own tables. We're going to look at that today as well, okay? And again, I have a database there loaded for you. It's LDB6, and let's download it, okay? And you should download 5 as well, and then be prepared to upload it back. And we'll enable the content, and I'm going to create save as database, access database, and I'll put it on your desktop and there. And if you're having problems getting to access or anything, remember, you use your station name, no password, you click on the VMware, and then it'll pop up, and the screen will pop up, and then they'll have you click on the little brown OBU thing. I think there's a little icon there, and then you can go down to the start menu, and away you go. Now, let's look at this for just a minute, okay? And we just got the tables called out, but I want to walk you through all the access objects that are in here. And the key ones, and these tables, yeah, pretty much the same tables we've had we're working with. Let's whip through here, and I've got, notice I'm combining some chapters now. Okay, why am I doing that? So you can understand, we talked about this one database, we treat it like a warehouse. And how I'm treating it like a warehouse is I'm running queries from these multiple chapters because I'm performing multiple operations. That's another way we treat it like a warehouse. Okay? So we're in 6, and we have this 6.3 insert 1, and let's click on it for just a moment. Now, he has the code there in that zip file. So you could download it, and if you want to mess with every one of the queries in chapter 6 and work through every single one of them, be my guest. They're there in the Patrick zip file. All you have to do is zip that down, the SQL, the whole bit. I've just tried to make it a little more convenient for you to walk through it. Now this is for 6-3. So let's whip over there to page 6. Let's walk over to 6.3. These are text data types. Before you do that, I want to show you or bring to your attention pages 214 and 215. Okay? Now, 214 and 215, what are they? These are the data types. Now, your friends that are computer science majors take a course on this called data structures. Why do we use particular data, etc. Some data round off easier, some go out higher digits, some store easier, some format easier, some of them are more manipulable. And he gives you he does a pretty decent job here of introducing you to these data types in the Oracle versus the Access. Okay? Now, again, while I know this may not be as exciting as the college football playoffs or Dancing with the Stars, or just simply slurping down whatever craft beer you heathen drink and your Subway sandwich thinking, I'm still doing something healthy. And praying before the meal, I know this is not as exciting, but it's as exciting when you're out at work and you can't get the data you want. That's when life gets exciting because your boss says, well, why can't you get it? And that's when you got to go to the IT department or your vendor and have a conversation. But what they're going to do is they're going to insert into this SECO 603 text data types, this table. They're going to insert some values, and I'm going to copy this. I'm going to put it on the notepad so we can see it maybe a little easier. Okay, now what we're doing is we're inserting some values, and it's very straightforward. And I'm inserting A11. Now, these are text data types. You said, what do you mean? Well, what I'm doing here, the A, I'm treating it like text. The machine is stupid. It doesn't know what that means. Could that be a number? Human, tell me, please. So you put the quotes around it so the machine knows what's going on. It's the same with the ones. In this case, you're treating those ones as text data types. Now, that could or could not be a good thing for you. If you treat them as text data types, you're treating them as if they are what we would call categorical data. Oh, so much stat again. I know. I understand. Also known as nominal data because they're counts, types. And the machine says, okay, you're putting in some ones and the alphanumeric, the upper lowercase a. Okay, and I'm working in that Lunches database 6 over there. This is insert 1. They have insert 2 because the author feels like, you know, if I have it, sometimes, you know, with some of this, it gets a little monotonous, and I understand that. And it's about as monotonous as if your mom and dad ever well, I doubt if any of you have if your parents exercised any kind of corporal punishment, because you probably called the hotline on them. But in my day, growing up, mom and daddy would give you a whooping at the drop of a hat if you challenged their authority. And one of the things I learned very quickly with my mother was her mantra was two. One, this hurts me more than it hurts you, which I knew was a filthy lie. And number two, don't you move anymore, you'll get more. And that's what I learned. You know, that you'll be there. You'll be in Target one of these days with your recalcitrant 7-year-old or 5-year-old or 3-year-old going, I do not know why I let you be born. You'll be there. Your time's coming. You don't believe it, I'm a prophet. It will happen. You look at that child and go, payback really is there really is karma in the universe. Payback is tough. Because you're going to see things in that child, you'll go, let's look at what we got going on here. This is 6.3, insert number 2. Now what we're going to do in this case is we're inserting some values, obviously, but then we also invoke another type of specialized term, and that's a string. Okay? And we're going to put in a string of 1,000 twos. Now, if you pop over to page 221, he walks you through the insert statements. He shows you that access result table with the length of the strings, a whole bunch of beeswax in terms of numeric data types, and then putting data into a table, which again you can do with a form. At the bottom of page 235 in chapter 6, he walks you through the same thing. You'll do a whole series of inserts. Just for kicks, let's do the data view on this and see what we got. And we have some expressions. Okay. Now, these are handled as expressions because we're invoking some data type language in the query, in the syntax. And so I get expression 001, expression 0, then 1, 2, and 3. And notice we've got all of those twos. We got a bunch of twos. You know, pretty? Get all that. Woo! Now, I don't know about you, but all I can say is I haven't lived till I've done this and had a vanilla shake from Chick-fil-A. After having done those two things, my bucket list is full. And I can go home in peace. Why would you put 1,000 twos across the string, across here? But the author wanted to show you that you can invoke that. And they said, what are you talking? How do we get there? Let's go back down and look at the SQL view. Pretty simple. You'll see string. We're going to put a bunch of stuff together. And then, okay, well, how much and what are we going to string together? We're going to string together 1,000 twos. Why? Because we can. It's just like, why would you climb Mount Everest? Because it's there and I can. And the people who perished in that exercise asked themselves in the last fleeting moments, did I really need to do this? Or huddled. I don't know how many people you could find on Google died trying to climb Mount Everest. I think at a certain point you go, hey, you know, drop me in on a helicopter and let me see. Okay, now each of these others, these inserts, you should be comfortable enough at this point to kind of get what I'm doing. And you can see here we go, we have some values. Okay, and here's another string friend. Is there anyone in here, anyone among us, who is a Christian and who likes bluegrass music? Is there anyone here who likes bluegrass music? Raise your hand. Anybody? You really don't? Oh my goodness. Those are some of the greatest artists in the world. To play a banjo, those are difficult instruments to play, and to play them that well, oh my goodness. Oh, Go listen to some bluegrass. It'll blow your mind. You go, whoa, how can someone move their fingers that fast and play those chords? And some of you might discover as you listen to it, this sounds vaguely familiar to me, like it's kind of in my DNA. It isn't mine. My people came from Georgia and Kentucky. So when they kick up that bluegrass, I'll tell you what, I'm at home. That may be why I have an affinity for moonshine. Actually, it's moonshining on the chapel at Rarity Chapel, not the liquor. That's bad. No. Don't do. Bad teacher. Okay. All right, my friends. Now we're doing chapter 6, and so we've done that. We've put together our strings. Let's pop that baby up, and there we go. We got another one of those sets of strings. Now, you said, why would we use this? Well, the string lets us. We may have to do some formulas or something of that nature. People in the hard sciences will work with these large types of strings, and the string can be anything put together as long as it's put in, as long as you invoke the string function and then then put them in there. So you might put a whole series of things that represent somebody's genome or something of that nature. All righty. They talk about over on page 228 changing the primary key of a table. Let's look at that for just a minute. Close this off. So you can upload these now, and I would encourage you to go and take a look. But let's look at the primary key, and we'll go up here to an easy one, which is the departments. I'll go to design view. Now we have a department code, okay, and let's look at that. It's a text data. Is it required? Yes, it's required. And do I allow a 0 length? In other words, nothing in there? No. Oh, we do. Oh, this is not good. Oh, okay, but we're okay because it's indexed with no duplicates. So the indexing says, hey, no duplicates allowed. So we're good there. Now, while this may look wonderful, let's say that you're a multinational corporation or a conglomerate, and you have 53 different companies that you own, or are part of your strategic alliance. You're part of your conglomerate. Let's just use the words. You might want to go ahead and provide 2 primary keys and make department code and department name so that you can be really, really sure about what department you're talking about. Or if you have multiple plants or multiple facilities, you're good to go. Now, all of you are sitting here, and I'm sure if there's anyone out there, is there anyone out there in TV land? No, there's not. Or those of you who will listen to this recording, I know religiously, I doubt that, but you probably don't. You listen to it like you do chapel. It's probably not that well. Probably put it. This is good background noise anyway. When you have the two keys, you just simply add a greater precision to making certain that a record is distinct. And then if you've done that, you're good. You're in good shape. 231, they talk about making a table larger. And over on page 232, they're going to show you some Access SQL, and this is using the alter table. Alter table, and we're in a 0612 foods table, and we're going to alter the column description, and we're going to make it variable characters, 25 variable characters. Variable characters means it'll take letters, it'll take numbers, it'll take exclamation points, it'll take blanks. Varchar is kind of the staple, the workhorse of all of those. So you run that query, and they show you there the beginning tables, page 233, and they show the beginning table and the ending table based upon that work. Not that big of a deal. Let's look at 0611 for a second here, and the foods. I'll go to the design view for it, and here we are, we have a primary key, the supplier ID. Now, here's where things get a little bit sketchy. I might want to have, I do have two product codes, as I have a product code as a primary key and a supplier ID as a primary key. The reason being is I may have suppliers who sell me the same stuff. In other words, multiple vendors handling a product that they send to me. So if they do, okay, then I'm covered because I have the product code and the supplier ID. They both have to match. That way I create a distinct record. That's all that's going on. You say, is it really this simple? It truly, truly is. For people who work out there as database administrators, they command six figures right off the bat. But the hard part is not this, it's the piece called database management, and that's writing the code to take a database and make it out and make it link up to an e-commerce store or link databases together out in the cloud. That piece is the challenging part, and that's why they're very, very, very highly sought people, because they can do that programming. Okay, but when they find a you who understands what they do and understands the power of this tool and what you can do with it and why you handle it like you do, they love you, because they know you understand the whole idea of an analytical cube, and you understand why we need primary keys and sometimes duplicate primary keys. The authors over there in 6, over page 237, talk about duplicate rows, the problems of them. Let's go here and come down to this 0614, the phone list, and look at the design view for it. Okay, and here we go. We've got the last name, the first name, the extension, and the notes. Okay. Now we created that phone list, but we don't have a primary key. So if I want a primary key, what I'm going to do, because people may change offices and so forth, is I'm going to make last name a primary key. And how do I do that? I'll click here, I'll come up here, and then I'm going to make the first name a primary key. Okay, so I'll make that a primary key. And then I'll come down here as well and make it a primary key if it's going to let me. Well, it's not going to let me. Well, you little weasel. Well, if I'm going to be faced with that kind of deal, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to open this table up for just a minute. And I'm going to add a true ID in here, because you might end up with, you see, one of the things you always have to deal with possible. You may get an Alan Owens, two Alan Owens. So I'd add a third. You got the notes. I'd add a 1, 2, 3, 4. I add a fifth, and I'd give them a pure ID. And what I do is this: I'm going to just call this ID, and then I will make this an auto number. It's going to bark at me, and then I have the auto number. Okay. All right. They talk about the problem with duplicate rows, why we want to get rid of them. And when we start working with tables, we'll find out there's a command called, when you do a union, you get everything. When you do a union all, you can cut out duplicates. But sometimes you want to get duplicate records just to see how bad your records are. Chapter 6. What else in here do I think is really useful for us? Let's climb down through these queries. And again, if I were to ask you, how can you tell me that I'm using this database like a warehouse? And that would be because I'm using it to perform a whole host of different types of organizations. I'm using, and particularly with the queries. I'm creating tables. I'm doing all kinds of things. And I've got them from multiple pieces of this. Let's look at 614 number 2. I just click it open, and so it's an update. We're going to update a row, okay? And that one is over on page 234, where they talk about making changes to other changes and changing the row. And we can do that in the GUI, or just simply do that up there. Do that up there in the. All right. This is access data. This is LD6. You'll want to upload it for 6, okay? So you got 5 and 6. You want to upload them in the place where you're supposed to. Let's go find that there place, and let's go up there and you find the syllabus, which rhymes with Barabbas, which makes it biblical. Let's go to 5. Let's find LD6, and there it is. And then LD5. Where is that? Okay. Now, we're loading those ahead, which is okay. Not that big of a deal. The Chapter 7 is a little bit of a different critter. And so let's go back into the files and let's go find the Patrick materials, okay? And I want to take a look at those for just a little bit and talk about them some. And there they are. There's the zip files. And we're going to download them. And as usual, we have the SQL fun. And let's see if you've got it on the top. There is Cardinal Buddy. He says, hi, everyone. I'm Cardinal Buddy. Okay. And let's open up the code. And then the code for the chapters. And let's find the code for chapter 7. Okay. Let's open that up. Now, chapter 7, and if you ever it's an amazing thing if you read the table of contents, what you'll discover, and it's an equally amazing thing if you look at the sections in a chapter. It'll blow your mind. You'll go, wow, this is what they're going to talk about. Okay, let's look there at page 246, and the authors tell us they're going to talk about formats, sequences, and indexes. Okay, the formats is probably the most important piece of this, because the format is where everything starts in terms of data manipulation and data presentation. Okay, again, all of this is about, all IT ought to be decision centric, and this is about building our understanding, churning through the data cube. Okay, and this doesn't become exciting until you start seeing some anomalies in terms of transactions. People quit buying a particular product, or people empty the shelves on you. Okay, or you're humming along at a 7-8% growth, and suddenly somebody disrupts your industry and comes in and they've got something different, and it could be any one of a number of things. So that's when that cube and the whole concept becomes important, because really a company, and we've talked about this before. Let me show you something here for just a minute to make, and one of the reasons I enjoy teaching this course is, first of all, I really love to torture students, and I'm enjoying myself today. But the second is to try to bring some business sense to all of this. Let's go back up in the files and find that analytical cube. Here it is. Okay. And to me, it suspiciously looks like a block of ice I might put in a cocktail, which would be orange juice and, nothing alcoholic. No. But I want to show you something. And again, we've talked about this over and over and over. Now, really astute companies have 2 or 3 of these. This would be current data sets, current transactions. In other words, a picture, a snapshot of where we are. Then companies that are really astute will have a cube that they've created if trends and conditions continue on. And that would be based upon environmental factors. Okay? The students who are taking the simulation right now, are going through the simulation, the CAP sim, are learning the lesson of how much will the industry grow this year, how much will a particular product segment grow, how do I adjust pricing and inventory and balance, and all of those things. That second cube, a predictive type of cube, would be based on external data that you've gathered. Okay? So the idea that you just have this internal thing that helps you is wonderful. It's good, but that's just a piece of the puzzle. All right, now let's go back into our file and let's take a look at it. And what we're going to do here is we're gonna run. This is just a very simple select query. Where it becomes complex is in the format statement. And you'll see, notice it invokes the format function. And then we have a field called the hire date, okay? And what we have there is the month, the day, the year, the hour, and the minute, and AM or PM as formatted, as a formatted date, okay? So let's copy that query, okay? And let's go back in here to our database. We had, well, did we open it up? Maybe we didn't. We may not. I'm going to open it, SQL file anyway. And I'm going to click Create. And I'm going to click Query Design. Close that off. And then I'm going to go to the SQL. I'm going to go to the SQL view. What I want to do, create. Let's click this off for a second. And I want to go down to the SQL view there. There we go. Make sure I've got the select format, and let's run this. Okay. And let's see what we get. Let's give me some. What have I got there that's undefined? All right. Is there anything missing here?
Employee ID.
Okay, employee ID. What else might be missing? Okay, a parameter. And there's one other thing that's not in here, and that is where I'm getting the data from. It doesn't have the from statement. What? Let's look at this again. Go back here and take a look at 7. And he's not telling us, we're just formatting some data. Now, the reason we got the error statement is he's not included the from statements. So there's really not much I can do, and I got the error because it's not saying, okay, which table are we talking about? You're just selecting some fields, and we're not inserting them in anything. We're not creating anything. Well, let's see if we can find some queries that are in here that might work for us. So we've got all objects, okay? We got forms, we've got reports, but we don't have anything there. Now in chapter 7, okay, I want to show you what he's done. Now, if you look at chapter 7, we've got that first piece, and then we have the from statement. So we should have what? We should have included from the employees order by employee ID, and that's there on page 250. All right. I did that on purpose to see if you're kind of following the logic of how this all works and why it didn't work. And the reason it didn't work is simple. We didn't identify the table that we wanted to work with. I just threw the first part of that query, the formatting part, I didn't include from the employees and then provide an order to that statement for it. But let's go back in and see if we can find in that Yahoo's, well, we got the insert there. We'll go back and take a look at the access code, open it back up. I'll go back to 7 and let's see. All right, now we're ready. Okay. Now, this is again is one of those things that the author shows us how to run the code, blah, blah, and then most importantly, neglects to tell us that, in most commercial products, you'll sit down and you'll go through a graphic user interface and make those changes. All right. And my spouse, whom I love with all my heart, is one of those people who, when we go out to eat and she'll see a dish and she'll go, I could make that. And I tell her, okay, do that. And I'm going to find, and we're going on Shark Tank and you and I are starting a restaurant business. And then she understands what I'm saying. And she probably can, but she probably can't produce it in the volume and the same quality. See, when you go to a place like, I don't know where the food all tastes the same. Why? Simple, quality control. So, low quality control issue here. And these, we'll take a look at some more in chapter 7. We started early today, and I really do think one of the things I try to do is work with your health, and you guys are so keyed up about these issues that I really don't want you to get overworked. And some of you, I'm afraid, will go home tonight and go, "Dang, format. Lord, help me with it, please." Do you think I do? Oh, if it's a client, or if it's a database and they don't get my stuff to me on time, I go, "Why can't they get my stuff to me on time?" So sometimes it pays to worry, sometimes it doesn't. We started early, and so we come to that point in time where I always ask you the famous question, that is, why are you people in my lab? Because if I were you, I would have gotten up and walked out of this class probably 20 minutes ago. I'm teasing you. I'm kidding you. I'm absolutely teasing you. But we'll work on chapter 7 next time, okay? And we'll do it on a screencast, and we'll go through 7. We'll talk about data formatting, which is another one of those kind of glitchy nightmares we have to live through. Thank you so much, folks. And let's see if I had anybody join us. We didn't. They trust that I'm going to save this recording. Don't tell everybody I'm not going to save the recording and post it. So then they're all going, you can go, you give me $50, I'll tell you. You got to be entrepreneurs. You got to be thinking. God bless you. You're becoming wise. You're learning not to listen to me. All right. I'm going to stop here. It's here recording.